Welcome back to Bring It Home, your show about American reindustrialization, the manufacturing renaissance, and all things reshoring. I'm JP Hampstead, your host. I got a great show lined up for you today, but before we get to our guest, we're going to do a rundown of some important headlines, as always. So, had a great manufacturing investment announcement come through. Philips, the healthcare technology giant, announced a $150 million investment in manufacturing and R&D. This will involve an expansion of Philips's Reedsville, Pennsylvania manufacturing facility, where they produce AI-enabled ultrasound systems for hospitals. And it will also expand the image-guided therapy facility in Plymouth, Massachusetts that Philips runs. Now, Philips already invests about $900 million a year in manufacturing R&D. This 150 comes on top of that. It'll add about 24,000 square feet of manufacturing space in Reedsville, another 40,000 square feet of warehouse space, and create 120 skilled manufacturing jobs for this equipment manufacturer. Larger deal, Hyundai Motor Group has announced that it's increasing its previously announced investment of $21 billion to $26 billion. So adding another $5 billion on top of the 21 previously announced. Again, this is, and we've covered this announcement when it was first made. The new money will also support increased vehicle production capacity, fund the construction of a new steel plant in Louisiana and a new robotics facility. Overall, the broad $26 billion investment is expected to create about 25,000 new jobs in the United States by 2028. So in just a few years. The last story I want to talk about is really cool this week. And it's an American manufacturing story, albeit maybe a slightly unconventional one. This week, SpaceX successfully completed the 10th test flight of the Starship, both the Starship upper stage and the Super Heavy booster. We call the full stack the Starship. But if you remember, they've blown up quite a few of them recently, which is again, part of SpaceX's sort of iterative engineering process, where they will take a prototype, run it really hard until something breaks, fix that, run it really hard until something else breaks, fix that, and slowly and over the course of multiple iterations, build up a very reliable, durable product. So this was a suborbital test flight. The rocket took off fine. All that was nominal. It went into orbit. It deployed a series of sort of dummy or simulated SpaceX Starlink satellites. It was really cool to watch the launch. If you've seen it, there was camera footage from inside of the Starship showing like the dummy satellites kind of rolling off the rack into space. That was really neat. And then, of course, it re-entered and landed in the Indian Ocean after a flight of about an hour. And so the hope is that this successful flight, which checked off all 10 of the objectives for the test, will sort of give SpaceX permission to do orbital tests of Starship. The reason why this is so important, well, first of all, it's an American manufacturing story, right? Like the Starship is largely built at the Star Factory in Boca Chica, Texas. The Raptor engines are built and tested in McGregor, Texas. SpaceX builds a lot of its sort of like specialized components and design work is done in Hawthorne, California. The heat shields are made in Florida. It's a very cool American story. Once again, we're building the most advanced, spacecraft in the world, the largest rockets. SpaceX has built 32 Starships, got 4 under production now, turning out about 1 to 2 a month. They built 17 super heavy boosters. Um, a very cool manufacturing story. And the reason why this is so important for the future of the United States, of course, is that Starship is scheduled to land astronauts on the moon as part of Artemis 3 in 2027. And a successful test that went all the way to landing is a huge step forward for that program. Really happy to see that. All right, that about does it for the headlines for this episode.
Welcome back to the Scenic City, everybody.
I'm really excited about today's guest, Dale Jordan. He's a principal at BDO USA and the National Manufacturing Industry Group tax leader. We're here to talk about a topic that I think is really exciting just because of how sort of comprehensive and wide-ranging and potentially impactful recent changes in the legislation have been to the tax incentives and capex incentives for manufacturers. So, without further ado, Dale, welcome to the show.
JP, thank you. I appreciate it. Honor to be with you today, and appreciate the invite to participate.
We got a lot to cover this morning. Bonus depreciation being extended to manufacturers is obviously at the top of our list of discussions. There's some interesting things happening with the way that companies can write off R&D expenses and things like that as well. But for now, can you walk us through the most significant provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill that manufacturers should be aware of?
Absolutely, happy to. So one thing that I think is really interesting is the conversation that we're having today around the One Big Beautiful Bill. Probably you have to look back to 2017, right? And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. When that was put in place, really effective for tax years beginning in 2018, a lot of the framework that we're talking about today was established at that time. What the Big Beautiful Bill did for taxpayers is provide a level of certainty around where tax is going and enhance some of the business incentives that might have phased out. One of the biggest ones is certainly bonus depreciation. You already hinted at it, JP.
But can you explain what that is for the audience, just in case they aren't tax experts?
Absolutely. I have a tendency to fall back in tax mode, so thank you for keeping me honest. So depreciation has historically been an item in which taxpayers, when they purchase something, are able to deduct the cost on their tax return over a period of time for the cost of that item. So if you have an item that's expected to last you 10 years and it was $100, you take 10 years every year, or $10 every year for 10 years, and you reduce your taxable income by that amount.
It's kind of a way of showing like the loss of value of your equipment or your facilities.
Very well said. Very well said. What bonus depreciation does is for any assets that are expected to last less than 20 years, given the language in the bill, you can now take that entire $100 investment that you made and deduct it in year one. So reduce that taxable income amount by $100 in that first year. And what that really provides taxpayers with is more cash in hand. So they're paying less cash out the door to cover their tax bill, which provides them free cash flow to invest in their business and or deploy in a way that they see best fit. So very beneficial from a cash flow perspective for taxpayers. The other thing I want to mention, JP, that's part of the bill that I thought was really interesting is something that's new for manufacturers who are investing in what's being called qualified manufacturing property, so real property, buildings, etc. They're now able to deduct that cost all in year one as well, as long as the building meets certain requirements associated with qualified manufacturing. We'll probably get more guidance as to what that means, but I think it's a really beneficial and powerful tool to utilize if someone's looking at expanding their facilities and or creating new manufacturing centers. It really allows, again, for that free up of cash flow in year one for assets put in place. Really revolutionary concept on that one.
I'm a little bit familiar with bonus depreciation from the first go around in the first Trump administration because our company owns a bunch of media properties in the aviation space, and
Mhm.
that really juiced general aircraft and business jet sales, general aviation aircraft and business jet sales. Especially if people were financing the purchase of a plane. Maybe they borrow. If it's say it's like a $5 million aircraft, and they borrow $4 million. Um, they put $1 million of cash down, but they are able to deduct the whole 5 million in year one. Then they can essentially step into a new plane without really, obviously they have to pay for operating costs and things like that, but they can
Mhm.
step into a new plane without really having to put down any money in year one. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
is this
agree.
the first time that this has been applied to buildings and real property and whole factories?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So on the real property piece and the manufacturing facility itself, this is really the first time we've seen it. There is a little bit of nuance around it with respect to how long you must hold the property and utilize it in order to maximize the benefit. And I say that just because if you put a property in place and dispose of it before 10 years are up, there is a little bit of a recapture there. But it really is a unique concept for taxpayers to deploy. Again, we haven't seen it before. And I do think it has the opportunity from a cash flow perspective to really help people further their investments in their own business and consider expansion of operations. And obviously, as we all know, expansion of operations creates jobs, et cetera. So I think it's a very powerful planning tool.
And this isn't just a tax break for big businesses, right? It applies across the board to companies.
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things, the broader kind of concepts with respect to the legislation. Certainly here, your comment applies, but everything that we're going to talk about today has the potential to impact kind of small manufacturing facilities that may only have a few employees, all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. So very broad, very beneficial if applied appropriately. So it's kind of bonus depreciation and depreciation in general. Another area, JP, that I thought was really interesting and we should probably talk about too was research and development credits, especially for, we'll call it startup companies. What we had seen in prior law was an amortization of research and development expense. So much like depreciation, if you invested $100 in research and development, under old law, you had to amortize that over 5 years if the research and development was conducted in the US. If it was conducted abroad, you had to amortize it over 15 years. And that was really painful, especially for startup companies. Because if you think about startup companies, there's a lot of research, a lot of development, a lot of planning that goes in early on. And cash flow likely isn't as robust as it might be in someone's later career, right? Or later lifespan within their manufacturing journey. So by allowing taxpayers to deduct that research and development expense in the year they incur it, really has the ability to alleviate some of the pressure on cash flow. And I think really has the potential to enhance the probability and likelihood for those startup companies to advance and continue operations. So I think that's a really powerful component there, and that was made permanent as part of this, which was a change.
That's really interesting. Having worked for a venture capital backed startup myself, I'm very aware of, metrics like, burn rate and things
Mhm.
like that. Every founder should always know, exactly how many months of money their company
Sure.
has left, right? When they're going after a raise or otherwise. So, how significant and anything that extends that runway is obviously great. And as we've seen, capital tighten up a little bit, tech multiples come in, at least in the venture space. Um, we've seen a lot of companies, just get a lot leaner, try to get by with less, raising less capital. So I'm interested to hear you talk about like how significant this is. Is say I'm like a software company, trying to build a technology that's never been done before. Does this allow me to like write off the salaries of all my engineers, or like how does that R&D expense like factor into that?
Really great question. So, by its nature, it's a complex calculation to determine how much the benefit is. But in very broad terms, research and expenditure um, expenses, that's the title of the section, it does allow for those types of expenses that you just referred to that are really associated with the research and expenditure or development of new ideas and concepts to be written off in that first year. So salaries would be one example, but then there's also other examples of expenses that might otherwise have to be amortized or deducted that allow taxpayers to recognize that benefit in day one. And to your point about burn rate and cash flow, this is just another one of the tools that taxpayers have to utilize an extension or um, broaden the timeline for which that cash flow has to be utilized. And one other point on both the bonus depreciation that we mentioned and the Section 174 or research and development conversation we're having. What's really unique is that in both of those law changes, there is optionality. So you don't have to take all your depreciation in year one. You don't have to take bonus depreciation. And you can utilize the useful life that we were talking about early on to incur those deductions or deploy those deductions in future years. Same thing with research and development, that there's ways to opt into a amortization program. And somebody might say, well, why would you do that? Why does that make sense? And why are we talking about it? The connectivity or interconnectivity of all these rules that we're talking about here is very, very complex. And for some taxpayers, they may not want to take a deduction in year one. It may be more beneficial for them to take it in year 5 or even year 7, 8. And I think what this bill does is provides an opportunity for businesses who are thinking long term and strategic in nature to set up a regime and a strategy around this bill that fits their business best. So as we're talking about the startup, they're going to want as much deductibility in year one because they don't have the cash to pay taxes. However, somebody who's a little bit more mature in their business may know of something on the horizon that's coming, and they may want to defer some of that benefit of a deduction until later years to offset something that they know is coming.
Like if they have like a major product release, they're going to be generating like a lot more revenue. They may want to wait to deduct their R&D expenses for that product, when their tax bill will be sort of most affected.
Absolutely right. That's a very practical and great example. Another one might be you have a contract that in 2 years gets renewed, and there's some front end payments there that you're going to have to recognize. So, great example and way to bring it home to a practical kind of application. But yeah, really excited about the flexibility that's here because it can be very beneficial to taxpayers who plan ahead.
And in your view, which industry, we mentioned like R&D intensive industries. We mentioned like tech startups, but in your view, which industries tend to spend a lot of money on R&D? Where could this provision have the most impact, do you think?
So that's a great question. And I think that the unique answer to that is technology certainly comes to mind to all of us. And that's an easy answer. But I also think a traditional manufacturer who is simply looking at their processes and in trying to develop a best in class process for their manufacturing function, facility, and process can benefit from this as well. This doesn't have to necessarily come from a new product line or a new product offering. Within the bill and language itself, it talks about experimental opportunities as well. So you may put something in place or a new process, a new machine, a technique, and it doesn't work. You can still benefit from this. So I think it's an important point because it's not just new technology. It's looking at what you have today and even improving upon that. So to get back to your actual question, JP, is I think this is very broad in application across all sectors within the manufacturing segment. Anybody who's trying to improve and get better has the opportunity to really take advantage of these provisions.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful, Dale. I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the other like trade-off. Obviously there are parts of this one big beautiful bill that are really meant to stimulate capital expenditures. But what are the trade-offs here? Why might some manufacturers choose to kind of shore up their balance sheets rather than investing a lot right now?
But one thing that is interesting, and I'm going to get to that question here in a second. We also have the changes to interest deductibility, and the language within this particular bill reverts back to prior law, in which taxpayers are now going to be able to deduct more interest, or likely be able to deduct more interest on an annual basis than they have had over the last couple of years. And so I think that's an important point as we go into the question that you raised with respect to capital investment. The combination of bonus depreciation and lowering one's taxable income via that provision and immediate expensing of an asset that you purchased, along with the ability to deduct additional interest expense, both provide opportunities for expansion of capital and investment in your business. So those are two things that are very positive with respect to investments. With that being said, as you mentioned, some folks may choose to shore up balance sheets right now. And I think that there's a broader economic environment that we're in right now between what are interest rates doing, what are tariffs, and what about taxes. Well, we have some real certainty now around taxes with respect to this bill being passed. We have a little bit more certainty around tariffs, I believe, as I look at it, because we're starting to see how they're being deployed, and there's likely a pattern there that we can all recognize. And then interest rates starting to, I wouldn't say settle. They're certainly not, based on the Fed's last meeting, coming down in the immediate. However, there is a little bit more certainty there. So what I see happening is folks taking the cash benefits from these deals or these provisions, shoring up the balance sheet, and then thinking ahead as to once they have comfort with some of those other variables that I just mentioned, being at the ready or on their toes to make additional investments. I think there's a lot of pent up demand for expansion, not only by private equity who has cash kind of sitting on the sidelines right now waiting for an opportunity, but I also see some of our clients beginning to look at internal due diligence and getting ready for a potential sale of their business or at least taking it to market. So I think we're on the cusp of a lot of opportunity. And so to your original question, I think now's the time where a lot of folks are positioning themselves to optimize on the opportunities that are ahead of them, whether that be acquisition or sale of a business.
I see. So while we're getting a lot more clarity and certainty on the tax side of things, and that may trigger capex and investment. It's only sort of one leg of the stool.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other kind of open questions with regard to monetary policy and trade policy that need to be resolved. Then, of course, like you said, companies that may want to take advantage of the economic situation, package themselves to go to market, may just be looking to improve their cash position instead of taking on like a big investment in the short term.
No, you're exactly right, and so that's why I think we're kind of in this exciting time right now because the landscape is being set, and you can kind of see it on the horizon. Something exciting is going to happen, or at least my perception is that people are positioning themselves for something exciting. And it'll be really interesting to see kind of how the next 12, 18 months kind of unwinds and where people choose to invest those funds on a go forward basis. Um, there's also opportunity out there today as well to take advantage of some of the changes today that we're seeing, as well as expansion of business, et cetera. So really exciting, interesting time here for manufacturing industry as a whole.
So the One Big Beautiful Bill creates a lot of new provisions to stimulate investment in manufacturing and research and development, but there are also pretty significant modifications to clean energy tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act of the Biden administration. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening to those tax credits and how that kind of changes the decision landscape for people involved in that industry?
Sure. So we kind of have three buckets in the way that I look at the way in which the credit landscape was handled with respect to the bill. In very non-technical terms, I kind of categorize them in three buckets: the good, the bad, and the ugly. From the ugly standpoint, as far as the consumer is concerned, a lot of the provisions around commercial vehicles, EV chargers, home improvements, EV vehicle purchases, et cetera, are going away, and they're going away in the short term. So that's one change that's made.
So if you haven't already bought your Tesla,
buy it now.
yeah, it's about to. When do I have until?
I believe it, and I'm gonna double check me on this, but I'm 99% sure it's September 1st. So you've got about a month,
Okay.
JP.
Gotta get on
About
that.
a month. But no, so I think on the commercial side, the individual side, there's certainly some immediate changes to think through if you're looking at trying to take advantage of any of those opportunities. The bad is, we'll call it 45X, which is the manufacturing credit, some of the hydrogen credits, et cetera. I used the term runway earlier, and I'll use it again here. Those credits aren't going away today, but the runway for deployment of those credits and utilization of those credits has shrunk. And it's varied by code section. So what I would expect to see is taxpayers, enterprises that were counting on utilization of those credits, whether that be from a budgetary standpoint, their cost of goods sold with respect to what is a cost to make an item, and am I going to be able to benefit from credits associated with it, expediting those projects in plans in order to maximize the credits available. Again, the timeline for that is not quite as short as some of the credits we were talking about before on the consumer side, and they do vary, but there is going to be people are going to expedite their activities around that those provisions. The interesting thing, though, is the good, if we will go to that bucket, clean fuel, carbon recapture really were not changed. And maybe the best benefit or the best thing that came out of this was we got clarity that credits are still transferable. And for those that are listening in JP that may not be familiar with that concept, I personally thought it was a fantastic idea with respect to when it was deployed. And that is entities that were generating credits, but maybe didn't have the taxable income to utilize the credit to offset their tax due, were given the opportunity to sell those credits. So as an example, if I'm a startup manufacturer, I'm making something unique and interesting and it qualifies for a credit, but because I'm so new in my lifespan as a manufacturer, I'm not yet profitable from a tax perspective. I was able to, and still am to this day, sell those credits to a taxpayer who can use them. And what that really does is as a startup, provides me with an additional flow of cash, additional cash or revenue stream to, again, extend that timeline for me to get up and running, while at the same time benefiting another taxpayer for the opportunities that I've been creating and working for. So the clarity around those credits still being transferable, I think, was a very good thing, and a sigh of relief for taxpayers.
Yeah, and I think it's a big part, or at least one kind of plank in the net zero plans that a lot of large corporations have.
Mhm.
Most of them at least partially rely on like clean energy credits, bought from other sources.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. Um, another thing that I think is kind of interesting, um, that we haven't talked about is the opportunities that this bill has created for um, professionals to become more strategic kind of in nature. And as I think through that, because of the changes and the pace at which change is happening right now, I think there's a really unique opportunity for folks who maybe haven't been involved in strategic planning and thinking ahead, or at least included in those conversations within their business, to really dive into the changes that we're talking about today, how they can benefit and impact a business, and really elevate themselves within an organization to become kind of a leader and a strategic thinker about the deployment of some of these ideas. I think it's a little bit lost on folks with the opportunity as presented, because like today we have an opportunity to talk about the technical, and that's kind of where we have a tendency to gravitate to. But I do think that the bill itself provides additional opportunity for folks to reposition themselves maybe within an organization and or a company.
And to that point about people maybe in research and design or um, you know manufacturing operations, perhaps like their plans like again playing sort of their plans becoming like more relevant to the CFO and like other strategic finance personnel. What kinds of analysis should manufacturers be preparing when they're looking at how they should take advantage of the new provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill?
I think that's a really interesting question, and a very good one. One of the things that we can't stress enough as tax providers is planning. So one of the things that we talked about a little bit already is the interconnectivity of this. So one example is plan out and model out how different levers within the bill itself are going to impact your business. The second piece, to your question around finance as an example, going back and looking at the cash flow needs of the business and the cash flow needs that might be presented within the bill, and then even further looking at things like um, value chain, right? And where am I getting my supplies from? Are there ways in which I can utilize today's landscape to optimize while still keeping some flexibility in my planning to optimize again where I am today and where I'm going forward? Uh, I think it's a unique environment for a lot of folks to think through and really kind of position themselves and align themselves with a long-term strategy plan. So I hope I answered your question, JP. I don't know. I started to go off there, so
No, no, no.
reel me back
That's
in if I didn't
no,
answer.
that's good. Any final thoughts on just the changes to the tax regime from this bill? I mean, I'm kind of curious if BDO or you, Dale, have any estimates as to like the economic impact, or like like is this going to trigger? Is this actually going to trigger a lot of investment? It's been. I'll just say this before I let you finish here. It's been interesting, kind of seeing all the headlines of the the eye-popping numbers of dollars being invested by various companies or pledged to invest right by various companies, and then you kind of like dig into it and you're like, okay, it's spread out over 10 years. What's their current like capex? Okay, is it
Mhm.
they're increasing it by 15%, right? And it's a big number because they've like rolled it all together, to kind of give President Trump his win of the day. So I've been having a little bit of fun figuring out like which of those investments actually represent significant pivots and sort of transformational like moves for a company, and which ones are just kind of like business as usual, or maybe business as usual with a little something extra. But in your view, and in BDO's view, Dale, how economically impactful will the provisions that we just talked about be?
Sure. We haven't looked at it as a holistically and said, the economic impact on the business community is going to be X, but where there certainly is going to be impact is in various sectors, right? What I do think is, again, going through and thinking through the lifespan of an organization, a manufacturer, what I think we will see is we will see investment very early on by those manufacturers who have, maybe for cash flow reasons or others, deferred reinvestment in their own business. So whether that means buying new machinery, updated equipment, et cetera, I do think we're going to see an investment by those individuals and those companies in their business. So I think there will be capital expenditure there in order to modernize some of those facilities, as well as reduce costs within their organization. And reduce costs can mean a number of things, everything from quality of products to efficiency in process, et cetera. So I think we'll see some investment there early on. I also think that with the shoring up of the balance sheets, et cetera, and I already alluded to this a little bit, we'll see capital investment at some point when the business environment feels more comfortable to those that are looking to expand their operations. And I think that comes in two different ways. One is merger and acquisitions activity picking up, but then also expansion and organic growth via utilization of what we were talking about at the very beginning of this discussion, and that is the immediate deductibility of an investment in a manufacturing facility. I think we will see plans get deployed around that, probably in the short term. Whether those plans get deployed and actually executed with shovels in the ground is yet to be seen. But I do think the organic growth opportunity for companies that particular provision provides is a very interesting one. So I think there's stages of capital that are going to be deployed, and they're going to be deployed in very different ways. So it'd be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I do think that this bill provides additional opportunities. And again, I'll go back to the optionalities that it provides taxpayers with in order to optimize the tax footing that they have that fits their business and their strategic growth plan.
Dale, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Bring It Home. You can find us on YouTube, X, Apple Podcasts, all of your favorite players. Our website, bringithome.us, has all of our previous episodes and newsletters. So definitely check it out. Dale, thanks again